Okay, for the second technique of breaking objects into pieces, we're going to use a technique that I really like, and it's using Pro Cutter inside of the compound objects of 3ds Max. But to work with that, you need to have volumes that are watertight closed. So we need to do a few checks before we start to break objects using this technique. So we've got a bridge here, and this is a theme that's going to be recurrent throughout the whole presentation. But we've got a bridge structure, and we're going to start to break it with this technique. So I'm just going to isolate that the base here, and you see that there's some holes there, so we need to fix that. If you want to check your geometry, there's a nice, now it's an editable poly. If you want to check if everything is right, there's a nice modifier called Stl Check, and when you turn it on, it's going to tell you where the errors are, and it's going to select the faces that are adjacent to your to where the problems are. So you see there's a hole here, but on the other side it's closed. So we need to fix that problem. A quick way to fix this: there's a nice modifier called Cap Holes. When you apply it, and I'm going to put it below the Stl Check, you see that it caps the hole. And if I go to Stl Check and turn it on now and check again, you see that now we have no errors. So it's a nice way of fixing holes that you have in your geometry before you want to use this technique. So now that it's cut, it's closed, it's ready to be cut using a Pro Cutter. So I'll show you a base technique to start with. I'll go and I'll create a plane, and I'll make sure that this plane has a lot of segments. So here 50 by 50 is good, and I'm going to draw this plane here in that area. If I take a look at the edge faces, this is what we get for the plane. I'm going to apply a noise modifier on this plane. And this is just to get a bit of irregularities on the surface there, so it's not a perfectly straight cut. So if I just increase the strength here in Z and reduce the scale here, not too much, but somewhere around 3 maybe, we're going to get some nice noise pattern on that. And I'm going to go into the material editor, and I've created a material for that, and that's kind of a concrete kind of pattern there that you have that's going to be the inside of the cut. What's great about this technique is that when we're going to cut this object using this plane, the material is being projected on the cut surface, giving you the nice result. So I'm going to align this object here to the center, so center to center. And I'm just going to orbit around so that we have a cut. What's important is that when you do a cut like this, the plane or the cut geometry, the 2D geometry needs to be fully cutting the big one here, the geometry that we want to cut. Okay, so we got our noise. I'm going to apply a UV map. That's going to be important because the UV map is also going to be applied to the cut surface. I can go here in planar mode. I can align, in Z or in Y or whatever. So I'm going to start in Z, something like that, and then I'm going to go into the gizmo mode and just align that UV map so that it kind of fits with the shape of this here. So, press the wrong hotkey. So I'm just going to turn around here like that, and I'm just going to scale that gizmo, something like that, and something like that. I'm not going to be too precise, you get the idea, and something like that, and then go into scaling and scale it like so. So now that the map here will be applied to kind of fit with that area here, maybe rotate it a little bit more so that the projection is more straight, something like that. And we got our planar UV mapping. So now that this is done, I can go into the compound objects, and the Pro Cutter is here. When I click on Pro Cutter, I need to have a first cutter selected. So a 2D geometry needs to be selected. So I'm going to go here and say Pro Cutter. I want to keep the inside and the outside of the cut, and because I'm using Max 2012, if I want to apply the material, the cut material to the surface, I cannot auto extract or explode by element, and I'll show you how to get around that. But now I'm going to go here and say Pick Stock Object, and it's going to cut this object here, and you see that we have the line of the cut, and now we're ready to break it by element because it's still a single object. So I'm just going to escape that here. Turn that off. So it's still a single object here. Oh, I pressed the X key, so that's probably why. So if I just move it up, you see it's a single object. So I want to break it by elements. We've seen that we've got this nice little script that allows you to break by elements. I'm going to say explode, and now we have two pieces, and you see that the material here is applied to the cut face like that. Another technique here, I'm just going to grab the road, and we want to break it and kind of fragment it in the middle. So I'm going to go into the top view, and I'm going to use the wireframe mode, and I'm going to draw a line that will define the cut that I want to do like that. So it's just a 2D line, something like that, and maybe we want to add a bit more detail in that area, And again, I need to cross the whole geometry. If I go back to perspective view, something like that, I can bring this up and I can apply the extrude modifier. And the extrude modifier will allow me to bring that line through the whole geometry. So that's a new way, another way to create a cutter that will give you exactly the result that you want. So if I select the cutter, go into compound object, Pro Cutter. Now I don't really care about applying the material from this cutter to the road. I'll keep the same material, so I can turn on Auto Extract Mesh and Explode by Element. Pick the stock object, and here we go, we got the cut. I can delete the cutter, and now you'll see that we've got two objects, and they kept the same material here in the middle. So that's why we didn't bother about the UV mapping and the mapping of the cut object. So this is another way to cut objects like that. If you want to create lines like this, but from a custom direction, when you create 2D lines, they're always going to be created on the active grid, or if you turn on auto grid, they're going to be created on the object, the first click of your objects. But what you can do as well is something like that. I can create a grid and put it anywhere in the scene, and then I can orbit around and say I want to cut maybe from that direction, from that point of view. I'd like to create a line that will cut from that direction. Then I'll select that grid and I'll say align to view, align in Z. I'll go into screen manipulation mode, and I'll just bring it in front of the mesh here. You see that it's kind of cutting through, so what I'll do is I'll just bring it forward in Z, something like that. A bit more so that it's in between the geometry and my point of view, and again align it to the view in Z to make sure that it's still aligned to the point of view. Now I can, while the grid is selected, I can say activate that grid, and if I go into line creation mode, you'll see that now I can go here and say cut this geometry with that line from that current point of view. And I'm going to deactivate that grid, or just reactivate the home grid, and you'll see that as I orbit around, this line was created from that point of view. Same idea, I'm going to grab that line and say extrude, something like that, and make sure that it cuts the whole geometry, something like that. And now we're ready to go, and I'll say Pro Cutter, compound object, compound object, Pro Cutter. I'll to enable all of these options, pick the stock object, and now we've got the cut. Can delete the cutter, and I've got those two pieces now as separate geometry. One last technique that I want to show for using this, this is kind of the technique that I use all the time, so I want to give you some of the tricks. Let's say that I've got a bitmap here that defines a cracking pattern that I'd like to use. So I'll decide again the point of view of the projection. So I'll take that bitmap and I'll align it to the view, and I'll go and I'll bring it here in between the object and the point of view. I'll just make sure that we reduce the visibility of this, maybe 0.2, so that we can see through it and we can still see the crack. Then I can go into line creation mode, and I'll turn on auto grid. I'll make sure by default it's off, so I'll make sure that it's on, and now I can click the first time on that surface, and it's going to create that line based on the bitmap plane that is there. So I can go here and follow that crack, something like that here, like so, and get out of that geometry. And I can create another one here. So I'm going to make another line, something like that, that will follow the second one, like so. So now we're done with this. I can delete that bitmap. I don't need it anymore. It's just a plane. You see that it's created the two in the direction that I wanted. I'm going to select the two, apply the extrude modifier, and make sure that it cuts through the whole geometry. And then I'll grab the first cutter, not the two at the same time, because I want to define the order. So you see that this cutter here doesn't cut through the whole geometry, but it will cut through the second piece here. So I will define that in order. So I'll select this first one here, go into Pro Cutter. I'll again turn on all of these options, and I'll pick the stock object. It's going to break it. I can delete that cutter. Then I can grab the second cutter, turn on Pro Cutter, again turn on all of these options, pick the stock object, and pick that second piece there. And now I've got the object broken exactly like the breaking pattern that we had on the bitmap. So it's a nice technique to create very precise pattern of breaking of objects. If you have aero objects that are very close to the camera, you want to break them very precisely. That's a nice technique to use.